Fasba Fpel released 100 albums in the year 2015, collaborated with over 100 different artists, had their faces painted tons of different ways, self-produced CDs that encouraged custom artwork, and much more. Currently, we're planning a 16-hour jam and a few more strange things, so please watch this video all the way through to the end to learn the history, the secrets, and some of the future of what may be one of the world's most ambitious bands, Fasba Fpel.
Hocus pocus, everything's out of focus. You judge yourself by what you see on a Facebook post.
Caleb Johnson had been playing guitar since he was 10 years old and achieved small-town success with his teenage hair metal band, Black Velvet. He later played with other musicians and released a more eclectic EP in a trio called the Sticky Lips. A few years later, he reconnected with his bass-playing friend Matt Ahi, who got him into death metal by showing him Opeth. They were stoked because they were able to jam together every day, and soon crafted a whole album's worth of material, but unfortunately they weren't able to find a drummer that could do the weird time signature changes. They approached me to play drums for them because we were in the same neighborhood and we had mutual friends, some of whom that I was already playing in a psychedelic folk rock band with. I told them I'm not a heavy metal drummer and they wouldn't want me in the band, but they still wanted to play with me anyway and I wanted to have fun. And in the end, they really enjoyed my creativity and the fact that I could keep up with the changes. So we started playing more frequently together and we were talking about getting a female vocalist and we tried one out, but it didn't really work out. So I started suggesting that all of us sing together, or we would take different parts and maybe add a lot of effect because none of us are good singers. But I started challenging them to practice singing every time we jammed. After that, whenever the guys came over, I would have new ideas for ways that we could jam and encourage them to sing, and these ideas got more expansive, and I took inspiration from Miles Davis and stuff, and eventually I realized we no longer made an effort to rehearse their material, and apparently they had gotten another drummer and were playing the material with that guy. So suddenly I'm not sure if I was actually kicked out of a band or not. But we kept going on with my craziness leading the way. During this time, I had a Super Nintendo in my room, and Caleb and Matt would often play Secret of Mana, where each of them were able to name a character. One of them improvised the word that looked like Fasba, and the other improvised Pell, and later I suggested putting them together as our band name. One day, I suggested to the guys, let's play for 40 minutes, but not play music. We recorded the session with a single room mic, added a delay on it, and thought it sounded so bizarre and psychedelic that we wanted to release it right away on Bandcamp for free. I don't know how much of our book concept was thought up that day, but we saw this release as a prologue to what was to come, and named it such. We wrote on and burned up a book, then took a picture with wreckage and garbage in the background, and digitally altered the image for our album cover. The album was released as Prologue on October 5th of 2013. It became the norm for us to play for 40 minutes straight every time we got together. After getting so accustomed to doing these 40-minute jams, we one day had the ridiculous idea to start releasing them every week. Caleb and I still to this day very much enjoy big conversations where we see about 99% eye to eye on extremely absurd creative endeavors and our opinions on different aspects of music and the music industry. We had so many thoughts about what Fasba Fpel stood for that it's hard for me to even recall all of it. We believed that music was often most beautiful or interesting when it came from natural, spontaneous expressions. We believed music should be unpredictable and constantly progress. We feel that when musicians collide, you can achieve sounds that could never have been written. We believed that everything could be inspirational to someone, and that sharing everything you do as a musician is a beautiful thing, and that sometimes artists that only show you their perfection can kind of become boring. Imperfection is often wonderful in its own way, and when different musicians are playing together but all in their own worlds, the sound of the music can be much more interesting Maybe someone is in a heavy metal mindset, while another guy is in a psychedelic mindset, and together with that other guy who is lost in a different tempo and time signature, we have a sound never heard before that could have never been written and is totally inspiring to the right set of ears. We also thought it would be cool to have a discography that could be used like a non-stop playlist of constantly changing music. Anyway, we were totally ridiculous and decided to start jamming a full-length album every Sunday and release it the next week. We decided that since it was going to be difficult to come up with track titles each week, it would be really interesting if we could tell a never-ending story through them. So we started writing about a wizard character in a sci-fi setting and would expand upon it every once in a while and break the sentences up into the track titles along with the chapter number for the specific book. This became our first of many album series, the book series, which started in May of 2014. At this time, it was still just the three of us jamming each week, and we would go through our typical vibes that ranged from very heavy metal to light avant-garde psychedelia and everything in between with a strange kind of jazz mindset. We recorded our sessions with portable microphones in front of the specific amplifiers, and then I would mix them with Audacity. After a couple of months of this, it was clear that we were going to need to start incorporating more musicians in order to keep things interesting. But before I move on to the next section, I want to mention one of my favorite albums from this era, Book 7, Reminded of the West Underwater. This is when we tried to be like a horror soundtrack slash doom metal band. Beginning with Book 9, we attempted to start having a guest star every week, starting slow with some of our friends like folk Hogan banjoist Cameron Anton on Book 10. Guests were encouraged to experiment and branch out, and Caleb and I would often force people out of their comfort zones. We also often offered the guests the opportunity to provide the album title and artwork, or to pass that duty on to a loved one, and due to that, dozens of artists contributed fantastic artwork. It was before Book 13 that my dear friend Travis Cross called me because he had found a sweet deal on a super awesome mixing board that we would call Glee-U. Scruffy, as we call him, joined the project as a producer and sound engineer, and eventually Caleb began mastering the albums. Book 13, Bow to Glee-U, featured the Rose Phantom on theremin, keyboards, and drums. He had brought masks with him, and his friend Purgatory Pete filmed the session. After that, I would invite one or two of my friends to operate cameras for each recording, and eventually had a light board, and light board operators came and went as well. Some of the characters that would come and go included Line Master, Violet, Chovy, my brother Jordan, Geed, my girlfriend at the time Brianna, Nana Lightman, Joel Condit, and Jersey. These last two often helped do some face paint for the group, but it was Book 28, Blood Smoothie, featuring the excellent bassist Eric Blood, when we met the incredibly talented Jez Roberts, who joined the project as a face painter on most weeks, and unfortunately it took us months to realize how awesome of a singer she is. Leading up to Book 28, we had had some really excellent albums with really great guest stars, including Riley McDonald from Advent Horizon, Sherrod Parkhouse of Sherrod and the Blues Day Riders, Craig Waddle of Sturgeon General, Jedi Duffy of Opal Hill Drive, and more. Book 29 had featured a dear friend of mine, Andrew Hopkins. He was in the band Melodramas that I had looked up to as a teen. Unfortunately, Andrew died from a drug overdose from his prescriptions and is very missed. I still consider him to be one of my top 10 favorite drummers of all time, and I really miss you dearly, Andrew. I love you, bro. With Book 30, we met John Farmer, who later gave me a radio show on his platform AMR, in which I would interview my guest stars, play some of their personal music, and play the jam that I did with them. The station has since dialed back to its original focus and can be found at utahmusicradio.com.
Where are you sitting? What book are you looking at? What show are you watching? Where did you place your mind? Where did you misplace your mind?
A couple of weeks later, we met author and musician Craig Nybo, who had such a great time playing with us that later that day when he went to his band practice at his own studio, He pushed record, they played for an album of 40 minutes, then released it for free as Freestyle Gargoyles. In April of 2015, they released a second album in the series, which they filmed and posted to YouTube. It featured 4 guest authors reading short stories with a conductor leading the band. This has since become an occasional Halloween occurrence with a greater number of authors and longer sessions. After over 30 weekly jams, the year of 2014 was coming to a close, and we had developed tons of ideas on how we were going to be able to release 100 albums in the year 2015, and we thought it would be cool, though not the sole purpose, to get a reward or some kind of recognition. Spoiler alert, nobody cared. The recording session for each book included a test jam at the beginning to ensure all of the equipment and levels were decent before the full jam. These shorter jams would be compiled as the Dark Diary series. Because the chapter titles for the book series told the story of our protagonist, we decided to use the Dark Diary as the writings of his antagonist, with largely the same qualities as the wizard, but on the other spectrum of light and dark. The album covers for the first 16 albums in this series combined together to make one piece of art that the 3 of us did together along with Jersey. We used this same tactic when creating the art for what we called the prequel series. Not to be confused with our debut album, Prologue, the prequel series consists of 23 albums compiling all of our jams that we did before deciding to release them. January 1st of 2015's release would be the first in the series Jamunity, in which we gathered guest stars from different bands to create a supergroup. I feel like these are really great albums for people who like more accessible music, because they don't get as ridiculous as Caleb and I like to push the band, but the musicians on these albums are top-notch and had a great time playing together. I'll never forget some of these meetings, especially when Craig Waddle of Sturgeon General expressed his excitement to meet someone that he had been inspired by, fellow ska saxophonist Dan Nelson. Jamunity number 4 has some great improvised lyrics and vocals by a kind man that I didn't really get to know named John Turner, who unfortunately left us at this time last year. As we moved further into 2015, we had some excellent jams and tried to incorporate new styles and genres into our repertoire. We had an even heavier metal album when Palmer of Jesus Rides a Rickshaw came over. Then we got super jazzy with Kendrick Zane, played some blues rock with Balls Capone, became a gypsy band with members of Folk Hogan and Orphans Cabaret, and tapped into our electropop side with Allison Martin. During all of this, Scruffy Caleb and I made Ocean Eyes Records, which recorded and released some projects for some other bands, but mostly self-produced our own CDs and CDs for other bands as well. When it came to Fasba CDs, we printed the album title in a very light gray font onto solid white CDs, along with a message encouraging you to create your own artwork. Most Fasba CDs included a sticker of the album's cover. Then the CD sat in an inner sleeve with more information and a picture of the album's crew and lineup. We would also tie-dye shirts and screen print our logos on them afterwards. Matt is an awesome dude, a great bassist, and contributed a ton of art, ideas, and good times to this project. But his mindset wasn't quite where Caleb and I were, and after the first few months of 2015, he expressed his desire to leave the project. When he was ready, we scheduled an album that featured him as the guest star and cover artist for an album we called Book 50, Farewell Donnie, as a tribute to all he had done. With our bassist gone, this created a new dynamic in which I was able to play bass whenever we would have a drummer come over, and sometimes we would enlist the help of Geed or Eric Blood, especially when we had a rapper come over like Ritual, Sin, and Grizzly Beats. We jammed with some Greek instruments and some great guest stars like Shane Profsgaard, Steve Auerbach, Hassan Cohn, and Bob Smith, before a guy named Dick Grant came over with a 6-string bass and deck of tarot cards. After the test jam and right before recording book 59, he laid out tarot cards and said, "This is our inspiration," or something along those lines. It seems odd to me now that this was my first time in the group attempting to sing a full concept album, as I love concept albums, and the idea of an improvised concept album is pretty interesting to me. I still really dig book 59 a lot, but think I topped myself with book 65, Funky Space Queen, in which I sang about all of the cats that had been in and out of the house throughout the years, but I tried to make it not seem like I was singing about cats, and that I was talking more about their personality types and their territorial conflicts. Of course, life is unpredictable, and there was more than one occasion when the guest star didn't show up. And on one such occasion, Caleb and I decided to just play together, and we made a very, very psychedelic album in which I told the story of a planet called Komodeyama that had been mentioned in our titles.
Those who have entered it know never to return without proper paperwork.
We soon followed this album with a prequel that also featured Miles Charette helping us with our avant-garde landscapes, and after that, Caleb and I concluded the trilogy with Book 74, Massacre of Komodeyama. For my own personal listening, I edited a 2-hour-long track that started with the prequel, then the original album, and then the conclusion, and I would listen to that myself, and I enjoyed it so much, I really wanted to package it with artwork that tells the story, and anyway, I haven't gotten to it yet, but I hope to do the thing someday. I really want to make this awesome triple album. Around this time, we finished recording our first studio album. It was a strange experiment with layers of music that don't necessarily go together, and some of our favorite singers and soloists performing over it. The album is really out there. My favorite track on it is the one with Riley McDonald. To celebrate the release of the studio album and have a big birthday party, we decided to make our first public appearance. We had been booked at the Woodshed, but they later told us they double booked with a touring act and that we couldn't perform. We moved the show to our studio and allowed several people to come and go from the stage. The performance was recorded and released as Shuck the Woodfed. We topped off the year with a series of 9 drone albums, created through mostly minimalist playing and altering the playback speed and other effects. I personally don't listen to these albums, but I could see them being used for calming atmospheres, and I know that Caleb is a big fan of them. 2015 came to an end with us accomplishing our goal and me moving out of my mom's house finally. That's right, all of this was in my mom's house, where she would allow Scruffy to just come and go whether or not I was in town, and all of this is really thanks to my mom. So thank you, Mom. I love you and we all appreciate you. Please tell my mom thank you in the comments. Everyone say thank you, Mom, in the comments. We attempted to keep the studio alive for a while and recorded stuff for our next studio albums that never ended up coming out, but it seemed that the era was at an end and we were all so exhausted from all the work that we had put into 2015, and so I actually stepped back from music for a while so that I could come back stronger with more inspirations in the future. Caleb and I often talk about finding a venue that can help us live stream a monthly concert, but maybe that's something I'm going to have to do in my own yard or something. And in 2022, Caleb remixed our album that features legendary composer and guitarist Tom Hopkins, and we released it under the name Fasba. We had intended to release remixed albums monthly, but life catches up to you, and Caleb just finished his first Caleb Johnson custom guitar, and I'm super excited for the 5-string bass he's gonna make me. The wheels are in motion for the new challenge that we've decided to do, a 16-hour live stream that I believe will be found on our Fasba YouTube channel on June 24th. We're going to be performing with our friends Miles and Marcus Charette, who had guest starred on the album Book 35 String Theories. There's obviously a lot more to this project than I want to talk about in this video. We may even do a podcast on it someday, and if you contributed to the project but weren't mentioned, of course it just means my script didn't account for it, and we thank you for your contribution, and you did a good job probably. If you're interested in working with us again, please shoot me a message. I'm also always having ideas for big world collaborations, and I would appreciate it if anyone around the world wants to collaborate with me. Send an email to seansmusichunt@gmail.com. Thank you so very, very much for watching this all the way to the end. I can't even properly express how much that means to me if even 7 of you made it this far. Thank you so much. Please remember to like, comment, and subscribe, and have a happy listening session.